the Children's Welfare Bill. Now, many of you that are watching this in different parts of the world, I'll give you some context. So in lots of countries, I know that homeschooling, France, for example, I believe, homeschooling's banned already. In this country, it's not. And to be fair, they're relatively lenient in terms of how much information they ask from you. So my kids are what they call flexi-schooled. So we've got an independent school they go to a couple of days a week, and then they're homeschooled for the rest of the time. And at the moment, we've been very much left alone. We don't have to do any of the various SATs and all of that. You have to send a rough idea of what you're doing with them, but that's it. What this welfare bill, which is nothing to do with welfare, is designed to do is make it more and more difficult for parents to homeschool and make what we're doing, flexi-schooling, where you have a bit of both, illegal, essentially. Now, that's going to do two things. That's going to put a lot of people in the system who want to homeschool but don't necessarily have the time to homeschool 5 days a week. Their kids will now just go into regular schools. Equally, what it will do is those independent schools that people can't afford to send their kids to 5 days a week, but might be able to afford to send their kids to 1 day, 2 days. That's me, for example. They'll go out of business, because if it's a case of send your kids there full time or don't send them there at all, I can't afford to send my kids there full time. So if that was the case left to me, I'd homeschool my kids completely, which would obviously have an impact on the family dynamic. It would obviously have an impact on your kids. And it would obviously destroy those schools. Now, there's lots of schools like this one that I'm talking about, where their whole ideology is about the kids. It's about spending as much of the time outside. It's no school uniforms. It's first name terms with all your teachers. It's about each child's individual way they learn. It's not about ticking boxes. It's not about a curriculum. And they want an end to that, obviously. They want an indoctrination station of schools. They don't want people to be open-minded, to be asking questions, to have an individual approach to education, because that's what education and learning is. People learn at different rates. People learn in different styles and at different paces. They have different interests. That's the last thing the state wants. So we're going to have a little run through exactly what this bill will kind of mean. Okay. So at the moment, let's run through this. This is a very good account on Instagram called Hannah Hen, who is very good when it comes to education and so on. Right. These are the clauses related to home education. And this is talking about receiving royal assent in Easter and being enforced at some point next year. Here's some of the changes you can expect. If you're withdrawing your child from school, you'll still be able to do so. However, now you need to disclose why you are home educating and how you intend to provide the education. You'll have to sit down and have a meeting with the education system to describe what you're going to do with your own child and basically convince them that it's going to be okay. That's a new part of policy. That's a mandatory meeting. You cannot remove your kids from school without having that conversation. Authorities say they can't stop a child. However, they can issue a preliminary notice and begin a school attendance order, which is a compelling order to take your child back to school, as soon as the child is deregistered. So essentially, the meeting is irrelevant for getting your child deregistered from school, but if they're not happy with what's been discussed, they can then issue a school attendance order after that meeting and after your child's been deregistered that says they have to go back to school. So, sorry, could we just... They're your kids, right? They're not the state's. In special schools, parents will not only need to request permission, so this will be schools for kids with special needs and so on, or behavioural needs. Parents will not only need to request permission to withdraw their child from school, but also must demonstrate that home education is in the best interests of their child. Local authorities will be empowered to refuse and override parental choices based on what they think the child's best interests are. So that's the local authorities that won't know the child. the local authorities that will look at a piece of paper, that will tick some boxes, that will spend however long, an hour, assessing a child rather than be with that child 24/7 and understand them. They're making the decisions on their future, not the parents. More children will need permission to withdraw. Parents must request permission to home educate if there has been a child protection plan in place within 5 years. Local authorities will be empowered to refuse and override parental choices in this instance. Now, child protection plans, there's obviously cases that will literally be about protecting the children that are in intense environments, violent environments, and that's what social services should be doing, protecting children in those environments, not coming after parents who are absolutely loving to their children. They just go against the system or something, or their face doesn't fit, which happens a lot. And so that's one that I'm a little bit more on the fence with, I have to say, because if you've got a history of violence and you've got a kid in school who can speak, who, if they've been attacked, it's obvious to others, there's bruising and so on, and all of a sudden they're taken out of school, that's a little bit more of a grey area. I'm not saying I want the state to have this power. I absolutely don't. But that's something that I can see both sides on. I really can. Because ultimately, what you want is your kids to be protected. And you'd hope and you'd believe that 99.9999% of parents that want to homeschool are doing so because they want what's best for their kids. But there will be a small percentage that there is something more sinister to it. And it's how can you protect those kids without taking away the freedoms of the rest, of course. There will be a compulsory register for all home-educated children with parents who will be obliged to provide extensive personal information for within 15 days, like name, address, description of the type of provider, any particular tutors that your parents are seeing, child's protected characteristics, whether your child has any special educated needs, the amount of estimated hours that you are spending a day, the amount of time your children spend without you, whether that be with a tutor or at clubs and so on. The name of each parent who is educating the children, addresses where education is going to take place. Again, whose kids are they? This is a final one, settings and providers, where someone is providing out-of-school education for your child for more than the prescribed amount of time without any parent or child being actively involved in the tuition or supervision of the child. They must provide certain information to the authority about the child or face a potential fine. So I would read that as if you're getting a private tutor to maybe teach your kids certain subjects and they're spending a day with them, if that's over the allocated time that they should be without you, if they're homeschooled, then people face potential fines. Again, they're your kids, they're not the state's, just to make it clear. Home visits, this is an interesting one. The legislation will require local authorities to make an assessment of the child's home within 15 days of the child being registered. Linked to this, local authorities would also have the power to request to visit the child in their home. If the environment appears unsuitable or the visit request was refused, local authorities would be required to consider serving a preliminary notice for school attendance order. So once again, the state decides whether your kids go to school. The state decides whether they're happy with what you're teaching them. So essentially, what a lot of people are going to have to do is lie. You're going to have to go, right, what does the system want me to say in this meeting? I'm going to say it. As soon as this person's out the door, I'll go back to teaching my kids what I want to teach them and what I think is important for them to learn. Got to play the game. It's not a game that we should have to play, but sometimes you've got to play it. Prosecution. There will be harsher penalties for not complying with a school attendance order, including heavy fines and, here's the big one, prison sentences for parents. Oh, that would be the wet dream of the system, wouldn't it? Prison sentences for parents, because then where do the kids go? Into the state's hands. There is a potential that parents could be prosecuted more than once for the same offence if they continue non-compliance. Note, a school attendance order process is not just about the child's education and welfare. It can be evoked even due to administrative non-compliance, such as providing all the information within 15 days of the request. Authorities will be able to share your child's data where they deem appropriate. Ofsted, Local Authorities Act, and persons listed in the Children's Act, such as NHS England. Well, that just gives you a bit of a snapshot of what this bill is all about. Doesn't sound like it's about the kids, does it? It sounds like it's about giving the state more and more power, more and more control. So if we look at the stories we've covered today, assisted dying gives the state the decision, the power to decide who lives and dies. Petrol rationing gives the state the ownership of whether you can travel, whether you have the ability to have an independent way of moving around and not have to use public transport. And this final story, children's welfare, which is hilarious that they call it that, give the state power to control your child's education, which you know is not going to be an education. It's going to be an indoctrination. They don't want wide-eyed, intelligent people. That's the last thing this system wants, because they'll very quickly see through it and call bullshit on the things that it says. So, all in all, the final message for the day is we've got a fight on our hands. But it's a fight that we will win. I have absolutely no doubt. Because once people get skin in the game in a fight or in a battle, it's very difficult to beat someone who is refusing to go away. And when it comes to protecting our children, particularly, I'm going to speak from my experience, there's nothing I wouldn't do. There's no giving up. There's no plan B. There's no, taking a knee in certain instances. Play the game a bit. Yeah, like I said, tell them what they want to hear for the hour they're here. And then they'll go away and leave you alone. But we don't give in to these people. We just make them obsolete. Because if we don't, we know what the future holds. And it don't look great. So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, we need to stand up and be counted.